Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Ames, and this is the second in our Adobe Stock sponsored New Year's resolutions for photographers to help them improve their businesses. And I'm very excited about today because we've got two really distinguished guests in the area of copyright. Um, and I'll be introducing them in just a moment. What I want to talk about right now, though, is Adobe Stock. They are sponsoring this webinar series, and copyright registration is important to them as well, because if you're going to contribute, you have to have a lot of the right kind of paperwork, and it protects you and it protects them. So they're sponsoring this series to kickstart our businesses and help us get going. The first one was organizing the photo library, and that's available. You can go up on Photofocus and find that. So it's really worth the time to go check out Adobe Stock and become a contributor. That's one of the reasons that we're doing this. So our participants, I want to introduce you to John Schlampe. Hi, John.
Hello, Kevin. How are you doing this afternoon?
Doing really, really well. I want to thank you for joining us. John is a very interesting guy. I've known him a really long time, and he's a former board member, national board member, and a current board member of ASMP Atlanta. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about ASMP, John?
ASMP is the American Society for Media Photographers, founded in 1944 in New York City, primarily by photographers who shoot for publication. And that's been its focus for decades. And with the advent of the internet and so on, they've really gone down the deep end, so to speak, in the educational realm, trying to educate photographers in copyright, good business practices, the importance of paperwork, that sort of thing, to protect themselves and actually protect their clients.
Yeah, and you've got some stories that you'll be sharing a little bit later. You have a wide-ranging experience in photography that allows you to create environmental still lifes, portraits, lifestyle images, and you specialize in aviation. You have a company called Aerographics, AEROGRAPHICS.com. Is that right?
Just Aerographs, no X. Yeah.
Great. In any case, you have a project going on right now that you are documenting from World War II bomber jackets.
Correct. Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. About 6 years ago, I started the project, well, making inquiries, and about 4 years ago, I started shooting. And to date, I've got 63 jackets photographed, most of them originals. There's a few replicas. And jackets at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum photographed, at the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, several other museums, and the rest have come from private individuals. And
now, these jackets are actually jackets that were worn in airplanes, flying missions during World War II.
Yes and no. It depends. You know, the aircraft then were unpressurized. So the jackets are actually not that warm, and a lot of times they didn't wear them, or if they did, they wore them buried deeply underneath a whole several other layers of clothes.
Right, because those planes didn't have air conditioning or heat.
No, they were open air, you know, and at altitude 30,000 feet, it was not uncommon to be minus 40 below.
Inside the cockpit.
Yeah, no, not fun at all.
So next we want to go, I want to introduce Jeff Veal. Jeff is an intellectual property attorney, and he's been doing it here in the Atlanta area for the past 37 years. He became interested in the law while serving as an officer in the U.S. Navy. And Jeff, I believe you were in the submarine corps. Is that correct? Jeff, are you there?
Kevin, I'm just barely here. We've had a little glitch. I'm not sure what's going on, but
yeah,
good to be with you.
Well, you're bouncing in and out a little bit. So I'm guessing your computer didn't really hook up, right? Anyway, as Jeff works to get back with us, he has practiced as a sole practitioner in a law firm. He's also partner in a small boutique IP. IP is intellectual property. And he's an equity partner in a general practice firm. And he's the head of the intellectual property department. And he has represented various industries of all sizes in patent, trademark, copyright cases, both in terms of acquisition of rights and litigation over infringement of those rights. And he is an avid outdoorsman. He loves to kayak, and you can find him when he's not in his office hiking a backwoods trail. So those are our players, and I'm hoping Jeff can get back with us. And John, let's get just a general discussion going about copyright. You and I are both content creators.
Sure.
My understanding, I think a lot of the people that are watching the
And I can hear you again.
good. Welcome back, Jeff. A lot of people are of the assumption that the second they press the shutter, that they have their copyright and they're good to go. And that's not the truth. That's not the whole story, right?
Well,
No.
you know,
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Well, both of you chime in. Let's have a discussion here.
Well, it's yes and no. Technically, that is correct. At the moment you press the shutter, you know, the moment of creation, it's the copyright belongs to the creator. However, it's basically a hollow law unless you register. And registration establishes ownership in the eyes of the law. And you can't file an infringement claim unless you have a registration certificate from the Copyright Office.
How do you go about getting one of those, John? I know you're going to go into that in more detail later.
Yeah, it's a relatively straightforward process. You're dealing with the government. You know, the Copyright Office is actually a subset of the Library of Congress. And so let's say, for instance, I just registered my last quarter, fourth quarter 2017 images. It was 700-800, whatever it was. And you can go online now to the Library of Congress Copyright Office website, and there's a portal there. You create an account just like a lot of other things with your login information, and you go through the form, you fill out the form. There's several pages and so on. It's actually not the most streamlined system in the world, shall we say, and part of the problem is because it's a government entity. And their funding comes from Congress. And so if Congress is always squeezing them for funds, there's only so much they can do. They would love to streamline, you know, and make it really slick and so on as far as the interface goes. And I think that'll happen at some point. But, you know, but having said all that, you fill out the form, you pay your $55 online, and then you upload your images. I'm sorry?
We'll get into more of those details in just a minute. I know you've got a presentation on it. Jeff, could you add anything?
I would go back a little bit before the registration process and probably talk a little bit about, you know, what is copyright and how it all came to be. The registration process is as just noted, somewhat difficult even online, but it's nowhere near as difficult as it was in the old days.
Amen.
Speaking of the old days, that's where the copyright laws actually come from. It's actually a constitutional right there in the Constitution that says that to promote science, exclusive rights in their writings. So that's pretty, you look at those few words in the Constitution and you say, just writings? What the heck does that mean? So that's the starting point that I like to start.
Well, that begs the question, Jeff, what the heck does that mean? What does writings mean?
Well, back in those days, it really meant writings and drawings and other artwork that was created with the technology that existed then. Well, no, nowadays the technology is significantly different than it was in 1776. So now copyright can cover photographs, sculptures, artwork in terms of graphics that are hand-drawn, computer-aided drafting, software, written text of almost anything, screenplays, choreographed, just go. If the creative work that has a form of expression in it, that form of expression can be protected under copyright laws.
And music too, right, Jeff?
Absolutely. Music indeed is an interesting thing, because in terms of music, you can protect not just the words of the lyrics of a song, you can also protect the score of the song, and you can also protect the performance of the song as three separate copyrights. And Beastie Boys was able to extract a lot of money from the Monster Drink Company, because they copyrighted their works, registered their copyrights in those three forms, and essentially got treble damages out of a lawsuit against Monster Drinks a few years ago.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
it sounds to me like it's really worthwhile to register your copyrights. But before we get into that,
Yeah.
you guys say a little bit more about the distinction between owning the copyright the instant the work is created and registering it. So let's just concentrate on owning the copyright or getting the copyright and what that means when the work is created. You know, for photographer, when you hit the shutter release, for the videographer, when the camera goes in to record. So I'm curious, guys.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to clarify, Jeff, you know, when I started in photography, I was in the service for a number of years before I became a commercial photographer, and you start thinking about copyright and that sort of thing. And you always, you know, as a layman, you think it's for somebody else. You know what I mean? It's for the
Yes.
big companies, and it's for people who have been doing it a long time. And I think most people don't understand it's for everybody.
Well, yes, it is. And, you know, Kevin mentioned a moment ago about the instantaneous just like I said, clear that your copyright does come into existence at the moment that you click or put in paper or start the work in tangible form so that it can be seen and reproduced. And everybody in the world, or in the United States, let's say, probably owns a copyright in something that they have created, come up with, whether it's a doodle on a piece of paper or a photographic image that they captured with their camera. Own that copyright. It's a big company. Like Kevin said, ownership is a little bit different than owning something that you can protect. And to get to that point, you have to get through the registration procedure.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think another thing that a lot of people don't understand is that it's an economic right. You know, it's not like the Bill of Rights and so on. It's an economic right.
Well, it is indeed an economic right, and that's the hardest thing that I have trouble convincing people of, is a lot of people believe that they see things on the internet and it's there, therefore they're free to copy and reproduce whatever they see.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is, those things on the internet are the fruit of software, and the copyright law protects those creators' ability to gain their financial benefit from their creations.
Right. You know, and I get frustrated when I see photographers that either A, don't understand that, or B, choose to ignore it. And they, you know, and everybody can do as they wish, obviously, with their economic rights. But when they just give them away, it harms the whole pool, as if you will, as far as being able to maximize the potential of an economic right, such as copyright.
Well,
it creates the presumption among the people that hey, it's out there, it's free. This guy gives his away. Everybody must give them away,
and it's not worth very much.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's you know, I relish the opportunity to try and bring people up to speed on things like this. You know, it's not a personal crusade or anything, you know, for me personally, but it's just I find it frustrating when people don't take the time or the effort to educate themselves about the potential of it.
Well, there's a lot of really good information out there. There's a lot of good information out there about copyright. Okay, I don't think Jeff can hear us.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, are you there, bud?
I'm sorry, Kevin.
No problem. No problem. We got a lag, and that's technology. It's going to be okay on the recording. So one of the things is that there's a lot of information about copyright out there. So this discussion that we're having today is an overview. So Jeff, if you could talk a little bit more about some of your experiences in copywriting. I liked your Beastie Boys example, but could you do a couple of these and give us some in-depth of what the registration actually does for the copyright holder?
When you register your copyright, the laws give you a plethora of rights that you can assign to prevent copying, duplication, prevent performance, prevent display of copies of the work. And when the Beastie Boys case, for example, in that case, there was a videographer who was hired to shoot some images, and in the background was a DJ playing records. The DJ had the right to play the records. He got that via a license. The videographer to the music. He had a right to make the images in working video to the sack on the video track.
Jeff, could you go ahead and try to log out and log back in? Because we're getting about every fourth word that you're saying, and it's not working really super good. So if you could just...
Okay, I'll give it a try.
All right. We'll talk to Jeff soon. John, you have a presentation about registering, right?
Yes, I do.
Why don't we jump into that for right now? And while we're doing that, I'm going to throw some goodness Adobe's way. What is Adobe Stock? Well, this webinar is sponsored by Adobe Stock, and it's a place where videographers and photographers can sell their work to businesses, marketers, web designers, and graphic artists. It's easy to search thanks to great keywording and an easy-to-use website where stock video and stills are available as watermarked previews that can be downloaded. And what's really cool about this is the previews are perfect for getting client approval. You can actually make sure that the image is going to work. It's watermarked, of course. And once you see how easy it is to find the perfect video or still image, you can do that by going to stock.adobe.com. Check it out. That's stock.adobe.com. Browsing the videos and photos and downloading the previews that are free. And when you find the one that's perfect, you can license the image. So it couldn't be easier using Adobe Stock. That's stock.adobe.com. And are you ready to share your screen, Jeff? I mean, John?
How's that?
That sounds good. All right, here we go. So we're going to talk about best practices in copyright registration. And Jeff, can you hear me all right?
Doesn't sound like it.
I see that you're back, Jeff. Can you hear me? All right, well, I'll see if he can't jump in whenever. Go ahead, John, and play your presentation. And
can you see it all right?
Yeah, it just didn't, it's not playing, but that's okay. Did you share your screen?
Yeah, thought I did.
Okay, don't worry. Try it again.
All right, let's see here. Yeah, presentation, start screen share.
Technology. That's all right. And just roll through. Can you roll through these slides here?
Yeah, sure. Okay. it was unpublished. So for instance, if you shoot on the 1st of October, you can go through the rest of the quarter, and on the 1st of January, if that's 90 days, whatever the timeline is there, you can register it as unpublished, even if it was quote unquote published in a periodical, whatever. And the definition of published, by the way, is open to interpretation to a large degree. And I'm sure Jeff can go into that a lot more in detail.
Let's see if we can get Jeff back on the line and see if he's able to talk to that. Jeff, are you there? Looks like he's not there. So,
right.
Publishing is if you show it to somebody, basically. That's my understanding.
No, not really. You can, it's if you offer it for sale. You know, and I believe that's the definition. So if you, you know, putting it on your website is not publishing.
Really?
Yeah. According to the copyright folks. You know, it has to be offered, you know, for license. So if I'm showing a series of images to an ad agency, you know, and they license one, you know, then that's considered publication.
You there, Jeff?
I've
got two instances of Jeff here, and I'm not sure which one
right.
he's available.
Right.
Well, if you can hear me, Jeff, chime in and let me know you're there.
So anyway, and there's a reason for publishing, for registering as unpublished. There's no limit, if I recall correctly, as to how many, you know, when I mentioned $55 earlier for a registration fee, that's not for one single image or one single work. If you create 10,000 images in a quarter, you can register all of them under that $155 fee.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of time lapse at one point, and it was not unusual for me to register 100,000 images in one quarter.
Right.
They were all almost identical, but
sure,
I was able to do that all for the same $55, along with any other job I shot during that quarter.
Sure. And, you know, people ask me, you know, well, do you register everything? And I say, no, I register all of my selects. You know, if after I've edited it, you know, I don't want to show pictures of my toes or badly exposed or out of focus images, you know, that has no real value. But if it's an image that I think has commercial value and I've selected it, you know, in my database, then those are the ones that I register.
But it would be okay, for instance, to register all.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to, yeah, you can register all of them. Yeah.
Okay. So what's next?
So you fill out the form, and then they take you to a portal, you whip out the plastic, and you pay your $55. And then the last part of it is you upload, you can upload your images. There's two ways to do it. The preferred method is to upload them through their portal. Now, I actually had the opportunity to visit the Copyright Office, I think in 2001, if memory serves. I was working with a British fellow at the time who had created a plugin for Photoshop that created contact sheets. And this was before it became common in Photoshop to have that capability. And we went there to ask, how large do the images need to be? And, you know, the Register of Copyrights was across from me, and several of her lieutenants, and the fellow who dealt with that, he said, well, there is no set standard. And basically what he said when I got out of it is it has to be identifiable. So, you know, if let's say an infringement suit is filed and both parties go to court and the judge says, let me see the picture. He's got to be able to tell that it's, you know, a picture of Johnny Jones crossing the street, you know, like the Beatles, you know, on Abbey Road and so on. Whatever.
Right, but it doesn't have to be high enough resolution to make a great big giant print.
No, it just has to be identifiable. So I send mine at, I believe, 800 pixels on the long side, you know, as JPEGs. And that's good enough. You know, most people can identify 800 pixels, I would think. You know, but you can do 1200, you can do 2000, whatever. It's up to you.
was just saying, you wouldn't believe how small the ones are that I send. They're like
Yeah.
300 pixels on the long side. When
Yeah,
you're doing
so-
100,000 pixels, it saves space.
Yeah, absolutely. And and so in this visit in 2001, this was long before they started online registration. So you filled out a paper form, and you put the images on disk, and then you sent it in, and waited for your registration certificate to come back. And a lot of times that was 9 months. But I got to tell you, I sent in my fourth quarter registration for 2017 on the 1st of January. And I was shocked when I opened up my mailbox on the 8th of January and received my fourth quarter registration certificate. So it happened in a week.
Yeah, they're getting a whole lot faster.
They're a lot better.
Waiting, 6 months to a year. Like in a couple of the books that I wrote, I registered the copyrights, and it took a really long time.
Yeah.
Back. What's the next slide, John?
So register as unpublished work. Keep a copy for your records, and I keep a copy of the images. I've got a separate folder on a separate hard drive. That's all of my images for that quarter that I've registered, and I keep a copy of my registration certificate. When it comes back, I scan it and put it in there. Lessons that I've learned. If you're in this as a business, find an intellectual property attorney in your local area. Take him or her to lunch. Yeah, like Jeff, take him or her to lunch, or set up some sort of meeting, even if it's just a half hour, so that you can eyeball each other and they can tell you, what's expected if there's a dispute, expected of you. Do you have a contract? Do you have a registration certificate, etc.? I served on the ASMP National Board for about 5 years, and we had an attorney on staff. And I asked him one time, this was 15 years ago, I believe. I said, Vic, in a perfect world, what does it take money-wise to prosecute an infringement case? And he said, a run-of-the-mill infringement case is about $100,000.
Now, by prosecute, that means suing someone that
correct
you believe is infringing on your copyright.
Right. Yeah. One thing also that people need to understand is
$100,000.
Yeah, it's a federal court lawsuit. It's not anything that's handled at the state level, which is part of the reason why it's so expensive. But when I register my work, it puts me on a plane with the president of GE. Really? I'm the president of my company, and I can talk to the president of that company in a legal sense. Yeah, I think so. Jeff can probably expand on that, but it gives me a huge.
But, sometimes technology fails.
Right, but
it's a shame.
A registration certificate just gives you a huge, walk softly and carry a big stick. It gives you a gigantic economic stick in your back pocket, I'll tell you. Because an attorney, you have an infringement case and you walk into an attorney's office, the first thing he's going to ask you, he or her, is, do you have a registration certificate? If you say yes, they're going to say, I need to see a copy of it. And, more than likely you can go from there if it's worth pursuing. If you say no, he's going to say, how big is your wallet? Because you're going to have to pay out-of-pocket expenses until the suit is resolved, and hopefully in your favor.
But even if it's done in our favor, if they haven't been registered, the law doesn't have nearly the protection that it does with a registration certificate. Right. I understand that the registration certificate is worth triple damages.
There's I don't think there's a that's a contractual thing. You can say that in your contract.
No, I mean if you violate the copyright law.
Yeah, no, there is no
registered.
Yeah, there is no set thing. You can get up to $150,000 per infringement, but there is no triple this or triple that, as far as I know.
I wonder if, Jeff, are you there by any chance? It doesn't look like we're having any luck getting him back. So, so if you have a registration certificate, it's just a huge, I call it an insurance policy.
It's an insurance policy for you, and it also protects your client. I think a lot of people don't realize that too. You know, if I shoot a job for Nike, for instance, maybe one of these days, and the image is infringed, you know, Nike's not going to be terribly happy about it if they've spent all this time and money creating an image for their brand that then, you know, somebody else has usurped for their own use. So, you know, it goes a long way towards protecting your clients as well. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand. But if you have,
right.
Yeah, if you have questions when you register, you know, your images, you can pick up the phone. There's I believe there's an 800 number or 202 number, whatever, but there's a number directly to the copyright office, and you can talk to a real human. You know, that was the one thing that again, you know, when you start thinking about the copyright office and the U.S. government and all that sort of thing, it's some obscure office building in, you know, downtown D.C. somewhere that you'll never see or set foot in. I got to tell you, it's a real building, and there are real people that work there, little old ladies in tennis shoes and the whole 9 yards, and they'll pick up the phone and talk to you, and they won't treat you like a fool because they understand it's a complex subject. And you know, and it's fascinating. You should absolutely go there sometime if you have the opportunity. They welcome walk-ins, actually.
That's really interesting to know, because usually we think that the government is against us, and everything I've heard about the Copyright Office says that they are totally pro artists.
Oh, they're pro creator big time. Yeah, they're absolutely on our team. Yeah, and they're wonderful people.
John,
pardon?
Let's move to the next slide.
Okay, we talked about the form, payment, etc. This is a short example of the power of registration. Hopefully you can see these two rather pedestrian images here. This is at New Echota, the capital of the Cherokee Nation, when it was in Georgia, before the Cherokee folks were moved out to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears in 1837, I believe, somewhere in there. Anyway, I shot these images in 2004, I believe, for stock. And they were licensed to a textbook company for one state for, I don't know, 30,000 copies or so for a year or two. It was a rather small sale, a couple $100, I think, whatever it was. Well, several years went by, and I was contacted directly by the textbook company. They wanted to relicense the images. And I thought that was rather odd because they hadn't dealt with me directly before, and they had gone through my stock agent. So I called her up and asked her to contact these folks and find out what they wanted. So to make a very long story short, turns out they had used the images in something like 17 states.
Oh my!
And 1.7 million copies over several years. And they had just totally blown the license out of the water. And they wanted us to settle for $3,000. And we said, no, you know, I've got a registration certificate. And so I contacted an attorney here in town along with my stock agent, and this went back and forth for about 6 months. And finally, on a Friday afternoon late, we had reached the end of our rope, and we had been in contact with their attorney, their on-staff attorney. And we said, okay, enough horsing around. We're going to file an infringement suit on Monday morning. And he came back and said, well, how does $50,000 sound?
That sounds pretty good, John.
That's exactly what we said. That sounds pretty good. And end of story. Then early next week, we had a FedEx check for $50K. And, you know, so it's not about the pictures per se. It's about the system and using the system to your benefit. And, you know, I was shocked, to be honest with you, that, you know, that it meant, you know, that there was that much power behind their certificate. And, you know, it was just a wonderful lesson. And since then, you know, I mean, I was an advocate before, but ever since then, you know, it's like, you don't even think about this is part of my routine. You know, this is like washing your face every morning. Every quarter, end of the quarter, I register, and I have a little book, which I can show you here. This is my copyright certificates.
Oh, I see. You've got a picture of it there. Great.
Yeah, I got a little video here, hopefully. and it's just a binder. And this was my first Form VA. Visual Arts is the Form VA. And this was in 1997, I believe, just when I was starting to shoot. Yeah, 97. And, you know, so I've just got document protectors. There's some of my old copies before I put them on hard drives. And every quarter, you know, so there you see, you know, form after form after form. And it's a pretty simple form, but that number up at the top is what gives you the power. And, you know, there's the one that I just received that I filed on the 1st of January, and I received it on the 8th. You know, so you file these away.
How fast they are now.
I'm sorry?
It's amazing how fast they are now.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, so you know, people ask me all the time if I worry about having my work infringed online. And I say, not so much. You know, I sleep good at night, because if, you know, after a while, most photographers who have been in the business, commercial photographers, they develop, you know, I'm told I have a style. I couldn't tell you what it is, but I'm told I have a style, and people recognize it. And so, you know, there have been more than 1 or 2 cases where a photographer's work has been recognized by other people. And, you know, the other person calls up Joe Photographer and says, hey, I saw your work in XYZ magazine. That looks great. And he's like, oh, really? I didn't know it was in there. And you start digging, you know, and you find infringements. People, you know, look out for you. Your buddies hopefully will do that. And, you know, and also just it's a great thing for clients too, you know, if they want to relicense the image after an initial license has expired. And so, you know, you can find out, you know, and there are search mechanisms online now too. There's several companies that you can sign up with that once you make your library available to them, they'll go online using their algorithms and they'll search for those images. And I've had images, I had an image found in Indonesia used on some restaurant menu card.
And Kodak has just announced that it's doing something similar to Bitcoin for protecting images. It's still in the we're talking about it stage. They've done a press release on it, but there's not any real more information about it. But their stock jumped, gosh, like 44%.
Really?
On that announcement that they'd come up with this new type of chain. I'm not exactly sure what it's called. Technology that will allow photographs to be accurately tracked on the internet. So that might be a big thing as well.
Yeah,
What's
you know,
next
that's
in your presentation,
yeah,
Jim?
that's been, you know, a lot of people have had you know, gripes for a long time about the internet being the Wild West, visually speaking, and you know, and there have been people, a lot of people working real hard at figuring out how to protect images and other IP online. And I think there will be a day when you will absolutely be able to lock your images, so to speak, so that they can't be stolen. We're not there yet, but it's coming. These are links. The History and Philosophy of Copyright is I just saw it on YouTube, actually. A fellow by the name of John Hess, who I think is a filmmaker, did a wonderful, probably half-hour presentation on where copyright came from. And it's just fascinating, the history and philosophy also behind copyright. The Photographer's Guide to Copyright is a guide, a free guide put out by PhotoShelter, photoshelter.com. And it was co-written with input from ASMP. And then, of course, you can go to the U.S. Copyright Office. I believe it's copyright.gov, but we'll get the links squared away.
Right. What we'll do is we'll post these links.
Yeah.
John's going to send them to me, and I'll post them on the announcement page for this webinar. So you can go directly to the websites and review the things that John's talking about. If you need it right away, send me a note in the chat pod, and I'll get those to you at the end of the broadcast.
And, you know, and we talked about going to visit them. So that's, you know, that was the upshot of what I had to present there. You know, but you know, I can't tell you how much, you know, it's a great feeling to know that your work is protected. And you know, and it's an even greater feeling knowing that if somebody infringes, you can say, well, you can, you know, you can contact them and say, you can pay me now or pay me later, as the old commercial used to say.
Yeah, it's my understanding again, and I'm really sorry that we lost Jeff because he is very well spoken on all of these issues and he explains it very, very well.
Right.
And I'm hoping we can have him on a future Photofocus broadcast so that people will have a chance to ask those questions. But my understanding is that if you've registered and somebody infringes, it's pretty much just like if you get rear-ended. The person that hits your car
Yeah.
in the back is automatically at fault and they
Yeah.
automatically get the ticket. And in an infringer will automatically lose if the images are registered.
Right. Well, yes and no. There is a concept called fair use, and you can use that for, say, a newspaper or magazine is writing an article about, you know, a show, an exhibition that I have up. They can reference one of the images to use for commentary and that sort of thing.
Well, we do that on Photofocus all the time.
Yeah.
And we're very careful to credit photographers and people
Right.
that provide us with, you know, fair use is okay for editorial use as long as it's non-commercial, from my understanding.
Right.
So,
and you know, and I didn't know it, but a lot of school kids, you know, education, if you're in school, you can use it for a book report or what have you. You know, and that's not a big deal. You know, the real crux of the matter is when people steal your image and start making money off of it, you know, because they're using it for advertising or promoting their product or service in some form or fashion.
Or even if they take your image and make a derivative work,
right,
and publish that derivative work as their own.
Right.
The New Hope image of President Obama comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge copyright issue. And a lot of times derivative works that can be tracked directly back to an original work of art, the copyright goes back, the infringement goes back, and the original artist has recourse because of it.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, and there, if you want to use an image, you know, what was it? Jeff Koons, I believe, did a sculpture of, I believe it was a husband and wife sitting on a bench, and there were all these puppies. They were holding all these puppies, and it was from a photograph. And he didn't, you know, get a license to use it and to create a derivative work. And I think it costed some money, if I remember correctly. Jeff could probably speak to that, but I believe that was the upshot of it.
I've reached out to Jeff by text a couple of times, and you know, sometimes technology just fails. And like I say, we'll do the very best we can to get him on again, because again, he's got an awful lot of information.
Sure.
So, John.
Yes, sir.
How big a hassle is it for you to go through the process of registering your copyrights?
You know, it takes 15 minutes, maybe. I don't think it's a big deal at all. You know, I've got my catalog in Lightroom, so it's organized by quarter, and that's one of the reasons why I do it that way. And so at the end of the quarter, I filter it by the starred images, and I have a preset all set up to create the 800 pixels on the long side. It dumps them into a folder, and I go online, log in, fill out the form, whip out the plastic for the $55, and then at the end you come to a different portal, and you start uploading the images. Now, one thing that I have found is that if you have several hundred or 1,000 images, just do several hundred at a time. You know, it's, for some reason it seems to hang up their system if you select all and say upload. But if you do them, you know, in little chunks, manageable chunks, it seems like their system works a lot better. And then the one thing you have to do right at the end.
Limit. I zip file all of mine, which is what they recommend. You know, you just go in and compress them either in Windows or on the Mac, and you get the .zip file. And I think they have a 200 megabyte limit. And then you upload the first zip file, and you can tell it to upload subsequent ones, and it will go from file to file to file to file. It just won't let you can't upload a gig at once. You'd have to upload 5 200 megabyte
Yeah. Break it down into small chunks.
Yeah. And that works really well.
Yeah. And then at the end of all that, you have to scroll. It shows you a whole long laundry list of the file names or what have you, of the images that you've uploaded. And you have to scroll to the middle of that on the right-hand side. And there's a green button, I believe, that says upload complete. You have to push that button or it doesn't actually enter into their system. And that's one thing that's gotten me a couple of times. And I've just trained myself to remember. Yeah.
Do they send you an email to let you know that it didn't finish?
No, they don't. But if everything has successfully uploaded, they will send you an email with the file names of everything that's been uploaded.
Right.
And I keep those too.
I get the name of the zip file, and I name the zip file by the year and the date that it's covering. So it will be first quarter 2018 is what I'm collecting for. That will go up in 1st of April.
Sure. Yeah. So, I think the important thing is however you organize it is to just be organized and stick with that same system, and you'll be fine. But as far as the ease of it, I don't even think about it anymore. I just do it. It's peace of mind. It really is.
Well, you see this as a cost of doing business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And some photographers actually add it as a line item, in their invoices. You can say copyright registration or, whatever you want to call it. But, absolutely. You need to build it into your cost of doing business because it is one of those hidden costs.
Well, can we speak to how it actually benefits the client for us to have that copyright registered? Because I've had instances where someone has taken an image, a competitor, and they've wanted to use it somewhere else, or they've started to, and I was able to say, you really can't do that because I own the copyright and you don't have a license.
Right. Yeah. And as far as protecting the client, again, if they've invested a lot of time and money in creating images in the form of, hiring you and hiring stylists and arranging for locations and hiring aircraft or whatever the case may be, all of a sudden they can have multiple thousands of dollars tied up in a shoot. And if Joe Blow, has an airplane painting service and he starts to use the image for nothing, that's, to me, it's brand dilution, but also it just, if I was the company that did the original commission, I wouldn't be terribly keen on that. And I've not had any clients, or never heard of any clients taking it out on the photographer for not registering, but anything can happen these days. That's for sure.
We do live in a litigious world. I want to take a moment and talk about Adobe Stock, who's sponsoring this series of webinars. And there's more to Adobe Stock than just videography and photography. This is something that people don't really know about, but they also have a huge number of templates. There are extraordinary templates for motion graphics for use in After Effects and in Premiere Pro. So people can get those templates, find video on Adobe Stock, insert that, and have really great looking visuals for their presentations. Templates are available for Photoshop and Illustrator, for business cards and stationery to get designers moving. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of icons for e-commerce, digital marketing, and more. Adobe Stock even offers 3D content. So if you're looking for content, open a browser and enter stock.adobe.com. Click on templates in the all menu and enter a keyword. The results will surprise you. They're really amazing. That's stock.adobe.com. So anyway, John, we've got about 11 minutes left. What are some of the thoughts that you have as a working photographer that let's just talk about photography for a little bit. We've done a pretty good job of covering copyrights, and since Jeff isn't with us, there's not really much more we can add.
Sure.
But you specialize in photographing airplanes of all vintages, and tell us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, I about 10 years, let's see, when was it? In 2000, boy, it's been longer than that.
Yeah, that's 18 years ago, buddy.
Yeah, no kidding, boy. I took an intern out to a local airfield to try and teach him the zone system, to be honest with you, which was a method of exposure and development for black and white film created by Ansel Adams. And I was shooting 4x5 black and white Tri-X film, and several nice images resulted from that exercise. And I sold several prints, and I had always been interested.
They're beautiful, by the way. I remember the one of the DC-3.
Thank you. And I've always had a lifelong fascination with aircraft. My dad was a paratrooper in the Army, and we sometimes would go out to the drop zone and watch them jump, and when I was a kid, and I was exposed on and off to aircraft when he was still in the service, and I actually tried to fly when I was in the Army, but my eyes wouldn't let me.
I was down in Texas over in Clearwater one time, and they were doing maneuvers out there, and these great big, I think they were C-130s, flew over, and hundreds of troops jumped out the back and on their parachutes. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It was an exercise, but it was amazing.
It's aircraft are pretty special machines, just because they can leave the Surly bonds, as it's known, of Earth. And, and they come in all shapes and sizes. And once you start photographing them, you realize an aircraft is a pretty special machine, because most of them are created for specific missions. And, a 747 hauls a lot of people, but you take all the seats out and it'll haul a ton, many tons actually, of cargo. And it becomes cost-efficient way to move stuff.
Well, they're repurposing the 747s now. United and Delta both have discontinued using them as passenger planes, but they're still the backbone of air cargo.
Oh yeah, they're huge aircraft, and and they can move a lot of stuff in a hurry to some pretty remote locations. Actually, I photographed an Antonov An124 in January of last year, which is the second largest aircraft in the world that flew into Hartsfield. And they loaded up, this was during all those forest fires they had in Chile last year, down in South America. And there's a local company here in Atlanta that their specialty is fighting forest fires with helicopters. And the Chilean government hired these guys. They flew in the Antonov, and they loaded 4 helicopters, a big pickup truck, and a big maintenance trailer into this aircraft with room to spare. And it hauled about 20 people. There's an upper area in the back of the aircraft that has airline seats, and they took all these vehicles and all these people down to Chile in one 11-hour flight. There you are. And it was just incredible to watch it.
Amazing what can be done. So did you get to do any interiors of that, John?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
You wouldn't happen to have any slides available that we could share? I mean, I realize this is last minute, but this is the fun part of a live webinar. You never know when things are going to go haywire. I just got a text from Jeff apologizing for not being able to get back to us, but sometimes the internet connections are just not what we wish they were.
Sure. Maybe, let's see, what is this? No, that's all. What about that? Nope. Oh boy.
This up a little bit early. That'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts on copyright, John? I see the puppy in the background.
Yeah, that's Winston. Yeah. Register your work. It's not hard. Make it a routine, and when somebody does infringe your work, you will have the legal means to pursue it. Don't be a victim. That was one thing I was thinking about earlier. You know, so many times you go online on Facebook, for instance, and a group of photographers are talking amongst themselves, and somebody says, "Yeah, XYZ stole my picture," and you know, and to me, they're like, "And." You know, what are you going to do about it? You know, and
Exactly. What are you going to do about it?
you know, and so many people just throw up their hands. Well, you know, it's far away. I can't, you know, pursue it, what have you. But if you've got a registration certificate, you know, you're in the driver's seat. There is no question.
Yeah, that
And,
dog has teeth.
yeah. And, you know, so absolutely pursue it. I can show you some pictures on my website, but, you know, whatever. People can just go there, aerographs.com, AEROgraphs with an S.com.
That's GRAPHS, right?
Correct. Yes.
Very good.
And,
Well,
you
John,
know,
I want to thank you a lot for being with us and
oh,
for
sure.
sharing your incredible knowledge about copyright. And I want to thank you for the service you do for ASMP, both nationally and here on the local level in Atlanta,
Thanks.
and for being such a great advocate for copyright. And I would like you to send me those links so I can post them. And next week, my guest will be Matt Hayward, who is the still evangelist for Adobe Stock. And we'll be coming to you live from Opryland in Nashville and Imaging USA. So for now, I'm Kevin Ames for Photofocus. And I really am glad that you've all been with us. And I hope you'll be able to take a look at our recording and send us comments. And Happy New Year, everyone. And keep those resolutions. Remember, registration is easy. If you do the math and you register every quarter, it's only $220 a year. So that's my final words. John, anything else?
No, thank you very much.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care.